Here's Ayaan Hirsi Ali to explain how she went from being a famous atheist to becoming a Christian.
I think we have to start with the extraordinary few months you've just had. For those people who haven't been following it, just tell us the story how such a famous atheist, someone who had rejected religion, came to call herself a Christian.
Well, one explanation she has given is that she believes that you, for some reason, have to be a Christian to protect Western civilization from being taken over by Muslims. Also, something wokeness.
So I want to say that I didn't, like many people who come to faith, I didn't see big banging lights, and I didn't have any of those spectacular experiences that some people share. I wish I did, but I didn't.
She wrote an article several months ago in which she explains that her conversion was at least partly an instrumental one, calculated to serve the purpose of political expediency. She said, "Why do I call myself a Christian now? Part of the answer is global. Western civilization is under threat from three different but related forces. The resurgence of great power authoritarianism and expansionism in the forms of the Chinese Communist Party and Vladimir Putin's Russia, the rise of global Islamism, which threatens to mobilize a vast population against the West, and the viral spread of woke ideology, which is eating into the moral fiber of the next generation." The bit about Russia is especially baffling considering the fact that it's also a largely Christian country that uses explicitly religious rhetoric to justify its actions, and the Westerners who are most sympathetic to Russia tend to be conservative Christians. So it's hard to understand how Christianity would function as a bulwark against such a thing.
I had a personal crisis. I lived for about a decade with intense depression and anxiety, self-loathing. I hit rock bottom. I went to a place where I actually didn't want to live anymore, but wasn't brave enough to take my own life. And so I was self-medicating. I had, over a long period of time, seen psychiatrists, other doctors. I was trying to understand my condition and trying to treat it with the help of pure evidence-based science. And in January, February of last year, I saw one therapist who said, perhaps it's something else that you have, and she described it as spiritual bankruptcy. And that resonated with me, and having reached a place where I had absolutely nothing to lose, I prayed, and I prayed desperately. And for me, that was a turning point. And what happened after that is a miracle in its own right. I feel connected to something higher and greater than myself. I feel my zest for life is back.
It's ironic that apologists will sometimes dismiss atheists who lose their faith after something bad happened to them as simply becoming angry with God or some such thing. But when a person starts to believe during a period of emotional vulnerability, that's a miracle that somehow counts as evidence that their religion is true. Apparently, facts do care about your feelings when those feelings are religious ones.
That's a moving personal story, but to call yourself a Christian is a bit different. I mean, a Christian has to believe in something. And, you go to church now, and you listen to the vicar, and do you kind of notice what a lot of nonsense he talks? I mean, do you really take it seriously that Jesus is the Son of God, Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus was born of a virgin, and that's part of Christianity.
I think Dawkins is inferring what I originally inferred when I read her article about why she's a Christian. In that article, she doesn't mention becoming convinced of any specific Christian doctrines. She says that she converted for political reasons and also because Christianity gives meaning and purpose. But what is the meaning and purpose of Christianity? Isn't it just to glorify God? What kind of boring purpose is that?
So I think because you, and I know you very well, we've been friends for a long time, and in fact, in some ways, I think of you as a mentor. I would say you're coming at this from a place of there is nothing. And what has happened to me is I think I have accepted there is something. And when you accept that there is something, there is a powerful entity. For me, the God that turned me around, I think what the vicar is saying no longer sounds nonsensical. It makes a great deal of sense.
Surely, when she was an atheist, she had heard stories of people who had various ailments cured as a result of prayer. This can't be a new concept to her. Why, if she believes that feeling relief from her symptoms to be indicative of a miracle, was she not convinced by the countless theists who told similar stories? Did she think they were all lying? How did she come to the conclusion that because prayer made her feel better, the God to whom she prayed must therefore be real? How does a reputed skeptic make such an inference? And how did she then become so credulous to all these other miraculous claims that are attributed to the God she now believes in?
Like the woman who told me, well, you've tried everything and you've lost hope, you've lost faith. Try it, pray. I think just in that one word, there is so much wisdom.
Of course, there are countless people who pray sincerely and never experience what she did. But again, she must have heard stories like this before and wasn't converted by them, so why is it so convincing now that it happened to her? There are also people who prayed sincerely and did experience what she experienced, and nonetheless still became atheists because they understand that this doesn't really constitute evidence of the existence of a timeless, spaceless, disembodied mind.
From what you've just said, it sounds as though you're more than just a political Christian. I mean, it sounds as though you actually believe it.
So what is your response to those specific questions of Richard? When the vicar is saying that Jesus is the Son of God literally, not figuratively, how do you square that with your highly trained rational mind?
Well, it is, again, different planes of perception. So I choose to accept Jesus Christ, the teachings of Jesus Christ, the story of Jesus Christ. I choose to accept that. So on the personal level, the rewards I get, very subjective again, but mine and through choice, which is separate from where I think that, aside from my personal experience, the history of Western civilization is mainly Christian, and that the external forces, for instance, the spread of Islam, non-violently or violently, and the challenge of Islam and the message of Islam to Western civilization can be countered and should be countered with the message of Western civilization, which is essentially Christian.
In order to believe that, you'd somehow have to square it with the idea that secularism, as a value, is somehow inseparable from Christianity. Even if you believe that secularism somehow grew out of Christian values, which I'm not convinced is the case, I really don't see how you need to be Christian in order to advocate for secularism.
And in that sense, I think there are more people who agree with me, but that is on the societal level. And then on the civilizational level, I think that every moral, you've used yourself, Richard, the phrase lately that there is moral Christianity and there is cultural Christianity. And when moral and cultural Christianity collides with moral and cultural Islam, or moral and cultural Confucianism, or cultural authoritarianism, I think then perhaps we're on the same page about that might be a way of countering it.
Yes.
But on the personal level, yes, I choose to believe in God. And I think there we might say, let's agree to disagree.
How exactly does one choose to believe in something that one doesn't naturally find convincing? Blaise Pascal says that if you go through the motions of being religious, you can eventually brainwash yourself into believing it. He argued that you should believe in God even if God does not exist, just to be safe. But I doubt I could accomplish that myself, because I would always be aware that my motive for doing it was entirely cynical and self-serving. While Ali's belief in God seems to be inferred from her experience with prayer, her belief in the doctrines of Christianity seems to be more politically motivated than due to being naturally convinced. Why else join Christianity rather than simply being a non-denominational theist?
And when you think about Christianity, Christianity is obsessed with sin. St. Augustine said that we all inherit the sin of Adam. Well, of course he didn't exist, but so we inherit original sin. Original sin came down in the semen. Jesus was not conceived with semen, that's why he's clear of sin. His mother Mary had to be clear of sin as well, so she had to have an immaculate conception. This is all obvious nonsense. This is all theological bullshit. And
I've always wondered how sin is heritable to begin with, but the idea that it's only heritable patrilineally seems especially baffling. I hadn't even heard that before. I don't understand how the idea that sin can be passed from parents to children would even make sense in a world full of miraculous occurrences. I don't understand what it would even mean for a miracle to make culpability genetic.
nevertheless, the stuff they believe is obvious nonsense. And you have to take the whole package, because when you talked about Jesus rising from the dead, you don't believe Jesus rose from the dead, surely.
I choose to believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
You choose to believe it.
Yes, and that is a matter of choice. And it's a matter, I think it has to go back to, is there something or is there nothing? And I think you start with, there is nothing. And yes, for years I agreed with you, there's nothing. But if you come round to the idea that there might be something much more powerful than we are, something that caused everything else, then something like Jesus rising out of the dead, or these other miracles, Jesus being born out of a virgin, for that higher power is not a big deal.
So because praying helped her depression, the God to whom she prayed actually exists, and people rising from the dead is therefore not a big deal. Of course, if there is an all-powerful God, then no miraculous claim made by any religion is a big deal. Why choose to believe in Christian miraculous claims rather than in the miraculous claims of other religions? I think the reason for that is purely political.
To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.